Hi, my name is Ellen Cassilly. I'm the founder of Ellen Cassilly Architect. So I grew up in St. Louis as the youngest of 6 children. I had lots of mentors ahead of me, lots of good examples of how to do things. It was also an interesting position to see how just the dynamics of people, 8 people living in one space. And we were always changing our house around, kind of seasonally. Everybody wanted to change rooms. And it was really nice to have that independence of shaping one's own space. My father was a builder. That was a great influence on me. Spent many hours on a construction site. My mother is from New Orleans, and we would go down to New Orleans once or twice a year, sort of on our Easter pilgrimage. We would visit her uncle, my great uncle, George, who had a home on the Mississippi, and he was quite an architecture aficionado, and he too was always making changes and adjustments and renovations to this house. And I think that really influenced me. Just the beautiful, clean lines and care and attention to detail and craftsmanship. One of my earliest memories as a family was in the fall, we would all be raking leaves, and everybody wanted to pile them all up in a big pile, and I would be raking them into little floor plans with doors, and I would get really upset when my brothers and sisters would go through the walls. I'm like, no, you have to go through the door, and that's the room. And it was just a fun, silly thing, but I think it was pretty telling that I was, at such a young age, sort of carving out space. Because there were 6 kids, and there were only so many bedrooms, and I will also say there were 5 girls and 1 boy, there were better bedrooms and less good bedrooms, or at least in our opinion. And so every year our parents would let us do some sort of round robin. We'd pick names out of a hat or something, and we'd be able to switch our bedrooms around. Or someone was going off to college, and so then that room got available, and everybody moved around. And it was fabulous to be able to start afresh and say, how do I want my space to be? I left St. Louis and went to college in Texas at Texas A&M. And I was there for 4 years, although I had a little semester in summer in Italy, which was completely fabulous, outside of Florence, and just wonderful to immerse myself in such a beautiful culture and beautiful architecture. After Texas A&M, I moved back to St. Louis and worked for a construction company for 2 years. Learned a lot about cost estimating. Then I moved to Boston to work in an architecture office, Stephanie Bradley, for another 2 years, and then got accepted to University of Pennsylvania for graduate school. Really liked Penn. It was a welcome contrast to Texas A&M. And then after Penn, I really wanted to work in another country, and so I was fortunate enough to get a job in the office of Christian de Portzen Park, and I was there for 4 years, and it was completely an amazing, transformational experience. His design is so free-form. It seemed like, we were breaking the rules as I had learned in architecture school. And his work was so lyrical and really, I think, heartfelt. And, I think there's a reason why he got a Pritzker Prize. He's really a fabulous architect. So when I decided to leave France, I was thinking about coming back to America, and it was at a moment when the economy was actually pretty bad, and I had friends say, "Don't come back to America, there's no jobs." So I decided to do some traveling, and I started out actually in Japan and ended up getting a job with Arata Isazaki. Just a very short term. He was doing a competition actually in France, and so I worked with him for about 6 weeks. And once again, amazing to see how another culture works. And after that, I got on my bicycle and I rode through Tibet, Nepal, and India for about 3 months, and then returned to America and was fortunate enough to work with Frank Harmon and learned so much from him. And then I also got a chance to start teaching, which I really enjoy, and I still teach today. The class I teach now is Design Build Studio, and it's team taught with the folks over at BuildSense. Often folks ask me about modern architecture, and to me, there is something about getting to the elemental question and questions of what needs to happen in this space, and then as well, I suppose it's still elemental, what feeling should this space help to impart on the folks who are in it. And I just feel like the clean lines of modernism, and I would also say the clean lines of vernacular farm structures are quite kindred spirits. And so I think there's nothing to hide, although we as architects are very good at hiding things behind other things. So I think just getting to the bare necessities and then augmenting that in a way that enhances people's lives. One project I worked on in Christian's office, it was a hotel and office building in directly across the street from Parc Lavalier. And I just loved working in France because it was so urban and just such intensity and concentration. And so there was a walking path that this office building needed to go over. And so we had to lift the building up and bring it over and come back down. And then part of the negotiations was that they were in the process, they were going to tear down the presbytery for this church, and so they need to give them a new one. And so it ended up being a hotel, an office building, and kind of a religious community center, which is sort of a funny combo. And we were working in models and about various possibilities. And it was about lunchtime, and Christian came in, and someone had peeled a tangerine, and of course it was almost the complete sphere, and we were working on this model, and Christian just paused a bit and he reached over and he took the skin and he tore it so it was a quarter sphere as a dome, as a quarter sphere dome on top of this community center. And it was just fabulous. And I just thought, it was so great that he just, picked up this peel and put it on there. And it just reinforced that really anything goes while you're exploring. When we were working on our house, it was an amazing crew. Essentially, 4 guys built our home. And the fellow who was the head of framing, he would ask me questions. I'd come by the job site at lunch, and he called me one day and he said, "Okay, I need you to come out at lunch today." And I said, "All right." So I came out and he said, "I have a question for you, but I don't want you to answer it because I think I know the answer." And I said, "Okay." So he posed his question, and then he said, "All right, so I think you want us to, put the trim board here and leave a little reveal so that can match up with that, and then have another board come down." And I was so overjoyed because it was clear that in the process of working on our house, he got where I was going and the vocabulary we were working with. And so in the course of working on this project, even though we had a question, he felt like he understood if we followed these rules or this format, that this is the correct answer. And of course, it was exactly what I was going to respond. And he was just beaming when he kind of got it. So that was really quite a joy. I worked for years with Frank Harmon.
I'm Frank Harmon. I guess you know who you are.
And he was a great mentor to me. And he would say, just a very average room has light coming from one side, but a good room has light coming from 2 sides, and a really good room has light coming from 3 sides. So with that in mind, I was thinking about our dining room and living room, and the windows on the north side, fine, no problem, large and towards the big view. And of course, the windows on the east and west, I wanted to control a bit more, just because I didn't want them to be harming the photography. And I thought, I don't want this room to be too dark, and I want to figure out a way to get light coming in from the south. And so that's when we had the idea of lowering this midsection of the roof here. And so there's another clear story that actually comes from the 2nd floor hallway and illuminates into the living room. And it also is a place where the solar panels live. So I'm really proud of that this room actually has light coming from 4 sides. And I think the lighting is really soft and even, and it really keeps you connected to the day, so you know where the sun is and how it's moving. One other thing about having that recess house the solar panels, I think for me that's a hallmark of good design, in solving one problem, but then you are getting that double duty of things are doing more than one task, and so you're getting rewarded because you're solving two problems at the same time. One of the amazing things about this site is the fabulous view to the north, and obviously the sun is coming from the south, and we have a photography collection, so we really don't want a lot of light coming in that would be hitting pieces of art. So hence the clear stories that are basically around the entire top floor. Another challenge in the course of designing this home is, I think I sometimes I need to remind myself and my clients that design is an iterative process, and it's not going to be right the first time. And that's why we keep going back and reviewing and reviewing. So near the entry of the house, I was wanting to have some bookshelves just kind of to the right as you enter. And we also needed some return air. And we thought, okay, well, maybe that can live happily together. Some slatted wood that will let the air through, and also some books, actually very similar to what's right here. And then working with mechanical HVAC designer, he kept saying, well, I need more square inches. And so finally I just said, okay, we get plenty of other places to put books, and it was getting so tiny, it was starting to look a little silly, so just gave the whole thing up. And in retrospect, I think it absolutely was the best solution, because it would have been actually a bit odd to have books there. So I think sometimes you work through some of these solutions, and at first it's a thorn in your side, and you think, oh God, I really don't want to do that. But then as you work through it, you realize, yeah, it's a better solution. Advice for students who are exploring architecture, I would just say, try to have as many experiences as you possibly can, both in a work setting and also travel experiences. And I would also say, before you go into those types of experiences, really ask yourself, what would I like to get out of this? Which may not, in fact, be what you get out of it, but at least I think you can be a little more focused and directed. And if you do find yourself in a situation that's really not giving you what you need, it's time to move on and see what else life has to offer. Because there's so many opportunities out there if you dig around and ask lots of people. And I know it can be embarrassing, or you feel like you're being a pain in the neck asking people for names of possible leads in other cities. But first of all, we've all done it. And I guess the other thing I think about that is someone can make an introduction for you to open the door, but unless you follow through and you present yourself in a good way, the door may shut. And so it's really up to you to make sure the door stays open.